The expensive oak doors snapped shut, the sound echoed in the massive dining room. Yihayan did not blink. He kept his eyes fixed on Minseok. The air vanished from the room. Someone had breached the private study. A file was gone. Yihayan wanted blood. He wanted a name. Minseok stood perfectly still. He knew Nyla took it. He knew the maid was a thief, but exposing the maid meant chaos. It meant Yihayan's paranoia would ignite. It meant the boss would look closer at everything. He would look closer at his wife. He would look closer at the bodyguard standing near her. Minseok stepped forward. His expression was a blank, terrifying wall. He transitioned from a shield to a blade. He prepared to feed his boss a lie. He prepared to destroy a lesser threat to keep the real secret buried. He was only meant to protect her, not become the kind of man she would fear. Across the room, Amara sat frozen. She watched the cold, calculated violence settle into his posture. She thought she understood him, but while he was out there becoming something dangerous, she had no idea what she was turning him into. You're watching a man trade his soul to keep a secret, but in the Korean underworld, secrets have a way of screaming. Right now, Minseok is acting as a shield. But as the tension in this mansion tightens, you have to ask, who is he actually protecting? Is it Amara? Or the version of himself she still believes in? If you can feel the forbidden longing and the psychological warfare brewing in these halls, don't let the shadows close in just yet. Yihayan remained seated at the head of the table. His wine glass caught the dim light. A rat, Yihayan said slowly. His voice was completely devoid of emotion. In my house, Min Seok took another step forward. The space between the bodyguard and the boss felt heavy with unexploded violence. Breach was external, sir, Minseok stated. His voice was a flat, deep rumble. A failure on the south perimeter. Amara kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. She analyzed the cadence of Minseok's voice. It was too smooth. It was practiced. External, Yihayan repeated. He turned around. He looked at Nyla, who stood completely motionless by the far wall. Then his eyes returned to Minseok. Explain. Technician, Minseok lied smoothly. Cleared for the lower grid. He bypassed the secondary relay. He created the blackout. Sujin stood by the door, her eyes narrowed. She scanned Minseok's posture. She looked for the micro-expressions of a liar. She found nothing. Minseok was a vault. Amara felt a cold dread pool in her stomach. She knew he was lying. She knew he was protecting someone. She realized with terrifying clarity that he was protecting her. By keeping the house stable, he was keeping Yihayan's attention away from their unspoken connection. Minseok was feeding a false target to a predator. And this technician, Yihayan asked. Dealt with, Minseok replied. The two words hung in the air. Final, Amara stared at the man she had touched in the dark. She wondered what else he was capable of hiding. In a few minutes, a ghost from the past enters this estate, a woman who knows the Black Dragon boss better than his own wife. The power dynamic is about to shatter, and Amara is about to realize just how replaceable she is. Before we see who is watching from the fog, tap that subscribe button and stay tuned to this series. If you think Minseok just made a deal with the devil to save Amara, drop an emoji in the comments. Let's see how deep this betrayal goes. The silence in the dining room stretched. It felt thick and suffocating. Yihayan picked up his wine glass. He did not drink. He just rotated the stem between his fingers. You handled it, Yihayan said, without consulting Captain Han. Sujin shifted her weight. It was a microscopic movement, but in this room it was a siren. The threat was immediate, Minseok answered. I secured the perimeter. I closed the loop. Nyla kept her eyes fixed on the floorboards. She was a ghost. She knew the technician Minseok mentioned. It was an innocent contractor who had been fired days ago. Minseok was framing a ghost. Amara watched the exchange. Her psychological training screamed at her. The baseline was off. Minseok was a man of absolute protocol. Breaking the chain of command was wildly out of character. Yihayan set the glass down. The sound was sharp. A breach occurred on your watch, Yihayan said. You failed to spot the technician before the blackout. That is a blind spot. Yes, sir, Minseok agreed instantly. He offered no defense. He absorbed the blame. Amara felt her chest tighten. She wanted to speak. She wanted to stop the trap closing around him. But any word from her would condemn them both. You take pride in your discipline, Yihayan said softly. But discipline requires memory. You need to remember the cost of a blind spot. Yihayan finally looked at Amara. His eyes were empty voids. You agree, my love? He asked. Amara forced her face to remain perfectly blank. Yes, she answered. Yihayan nodded slowly. He seemed satisfied by her cold response. He turned his attention back to Minseok. You will surrender your position on the south wing, Yihayan ordered. Captain Han will reassign you. You will take the exterior gate, the night shift. Exterior gate was exile. It meant standing in the cold. It meant zero access to the inner house. It meant zero access to Amara. Minseok did not react. He bowed deeply. Understood, sir. Sujin opened the dining room doors. The lockdown was over. Yihayan stood up. He walked past Amara without a glance. He walked past Minseok without a word. He stopped near the doorway right next to Nyla. Bring my tea to the study, Yihayan told the maid. Right away, sir, Nyla answered quietly. Yihayan left. Sujin followed, casting one last, calculating look at Minseok. Amara was left alone in the vast room with her bodyguard. Minseok stood up straight. He did not look at her. He maintained his professional distance. You lied, Amara said. Her voice was flat. Minseok turned toward the door. I secured the perimeter, Dr. Vaughn, he said. His voice was rigid. You exiled yourself, she countered. Minseok paused. His broad shoulders were tense. He stood with his back to her. It is better to be in the cold, Minseok said, than to let the fire burn the house down. He walked out. Amara sat alone in the echoing room. She realized the punishment wasn't just his. It was hers. He was gone, and the house had never felt more dangerous. The estate settled into a paranoid quiet. It was a different kind of silence than before. Before, it was the silence of emptiness. Now it was the silence of a loaded weapon. Captain Han Soo-jin reviewed the security footage. She sat in the monitor room, watching the blank 4 minutes of the blackout. She played it back, again and again. She checked the logs for the technician Minseok had blamed. The contractor's access badge had swiped at the perimeter, but the timing was too perfect. The swipe happened exactly when Minseok claimed. It was too clean. Soo-jin tapped her pen on the desk. Minseok was a professional. If he wanted to frame someone, he would do it flawlessly. She understood why men lied. They lied for money, for power, or for survival. Minseok didn't care about money. He already had enough power in his rank that left survival. But whose survival was he securing? Soo-jin pulled up the camera feed for the exterior gate. It was raining again. The cold downpour lashed against the concrete. Minseok stood by the guardhouse. He was exposed to the elements. He did not seek shelter. He stood like a stone statue in the dark. He was punishing himself. Soo-jin zoomed in on his face. His expression was completely blank, but she knew the look of a man carrying a heavy casualty. He wasn't guarding the gate. He was keeping himself away from the inside. Soo-jin made a note on her tablet. The threat wasn't the stolen file. The threat was still inside the house. The heavy door to the study was slightly ajar. Yi Hyun sat in his leather chair. The only light came from a small desk lamp. A book of poetry lay open on his desk, ignored. Nyla entered the room holding a silver tray. Her footsteps made no sound on the thick rug. She placed the teacup on his desk. Yi Hyun did not look at the tea. He looked at her hands. They were steady. They were the hands of a survivor. House is on edge, Yi Hyun said. His voice was low in the quiet room. Yes, sir, Nyla replied. She stood beside his desk. She did not retreat to the door. It was a subtle shift in protocol. A silent assertion of space. Do you feel safe here, Nyla? He asked. Nyla looked at his face. The corporate mask was gone. The exhaustion underneath was visible. Safety is an illusion, Mr. Kang, Nyla answered truthfully. Yi Hyun leaned back. He found her honesty deeply comforting. Everyone else in the house managed him. They managed his moods, his orders, his violence. Nyla just watched him. She had the ledger. She had secured the proof she needed to survive. She should have run the moment the lockdown lifted. But standing in the dark study, she felt a strange pull. She was holding a knife to the Empire, yet the Emperor was asking her for comfort. Yi Hyun reached out. He picked up the teacup. His fingers brushed the edge of the silver tray. He wanted her to stay, and she knew it. Amara walked through the second-floor gallery. The massive paintings of sinking ships felt oppressive today. The house was a tomb, and she was the primary ghost. She missed the quiet presence behind her. She missed the heavy footsteps of her shadow. Tiwoo stepped out from behind a marble pillar. He was eating a green apple. You look lost, sister-in-law, Tiwoo said casually. Amara stopped. She kept her face neutral. I am taking a walk, Tiwoo. Tiwoo fell into step beside her. He took a loud bite of the apple. The sound echoed down the long, empty hall. House feels different today, Tiwoo noted. He looked out the massive windows toward the front gates. A little colder, a little more exposed. Amara did not look out the window. She knew who was standing in the freezing rain at the gate. Security adjustments, Amara replied calmly. Tiwoo smiled. It was a sharp, knowing expression. My brother is a harsh master, Tiwoo said. He demands perfection, and when he doesn't get it, he breaks things. Tiwoo stopped walking. He turned to face her directly. It's a shame about your loyal dog, Tiwoo murmured. Sent out into the cold, banished from the warmth of the house. Amara kept her breathing steady. She refused to give him a reaction. Min-seok serves my husband, Amara said. Tiwoo laughed quietly. It was a cold, dry sound. Tiwoo asked. I suppose we will see how long a dog survives in the freezing rain before it bites the hand that locked it out. Atmosphere in the house shifted by late afternoon. The silent dread was replaced by frantic, precise movement. The staff moved quickly, polishing silver and arranging elaborate floral displays. Amara sat in her room, watching the activity from her window. A formal dinner was being prepared. No one had informed her. Yi Hyun had not sent a message. She was the lady of the house, yet she was treated like an afterthought. It was a calculated display of power. Amara dressed carefully. She chose a fitted, dark emerald dress. It was elegant but restrictive. It felt like armor. She analyzed her own reflection. She saw the loneliness pulling at the corners of her eyes. She saw the exhaustion in her posture. She needed to project strength. She walked downstairs. The grand dining table was set for 3. Amara stopped in the doorway. Yi Hyun never hosted business partners at the private estate. If there was a third plate, it was someone deeply connected to the inner circle. She stepped into the room. The air was already heavy. Yi Hyun stood by the fireplace. He wore a perfectly tailored grey suit. He looked relaxed. It was a posture Amara had rarely seen. He was not looking at the door. He was looking at the woman seated comfortably on the velvet sofa. The woman turned her head slowly as Amara entered. She did not stand up. She did not rush to greet the host's wife. She simply watched Amara cross the room, holding her space with absolute, effortless authority. The ghost had arrived. Yoon Jae held a crystal glass of sparkling water. She wore a deep wine-colored silk blouse and a structured skirt. Her silhouette was mature, grounded, and undeniably powerful. She didn't try to demand attention. The gravity of the room simply shifted toward her. Yi Hyun gestured slightly. Amara, Yi Hyun said. His tone was perfectly polite, entirely empty. This is Yoon Jae, an old associate of the family. Jae offered a small, composed smile. It is a pleasure, Jae said. Her English was flawless. It carried no accent, no hesitation. Amara stepped forward. Welcome to our home. Jae's smile did not reach her eyes. She looked around the massive, cold dining room. It has changed since I was last here, Jae noted. She switched seamlessly to Korean. She spoke directly to Yi Hyun. Her tone was intimate. It was the tone of someone who knew the foundation of the house. Yi Hyun answered in Korean. His voice was softer than usual. Amara stood frozen. She understood the language perfectly, but the barrier wasn't linguistic. It was historical. They were speaking a language of shared ambition. They were speaking of political timing, of past alliances, of things built before Amara existed in this world. Amara was a criminal psychologist. She recognized a power play instantly. Jae was not attacking her. She was simply demonstrating that Amara was a visitor in a world Jae helped build. Amara felt her armor cracking. She felt entirely alone in a room full of people. She glanced toward the hallway. The door was empty. Her shadow was gone. Dinner was an exercise in psychological endurance. Three of them sat at the long table. The crystal glasses clinked. The silver scraped against the china. Jae moved with slow, deliberate grace. She did not rush her words. She dominated the space by simply existing in it. Tokyo merger is stabilizing, Jae said. She addressed Yi Hyun. But the southern ports need your direct oversight. The new developers are getting bold. Captain Han is handling the perimeter, Yi Hyun replied. He took a sip of wine. He was discussing syndicate business openly. He never discussed business in front of Amara. Amara sat in silence. She pushed the intricate food around her plate. She felt like a prop placed at the table for aesthetic balance. Jae turned her heavy-lidded eyes toward Amara. Yi Hyun tells me you were a psychologist in the States, Jae said. I was, Amara answered. She kept her voice even. Fascinating work, Jae murmured. Analyzing broken things, trying to find order in chaos. Jae set her fork down. She folded her hands on the table. It must be quite an adjustment, Jae continued. Moving from a world where you fix people to a world where people are simply managed. Amara met her gaze. The older woman's eyes were steady and unapologetic. Jae turned her head slightly. The gesture was polite, but the words were a surgical strike. You must be the wife I've heard so little about, Jae said. The silence in the dining room became absolute. Amara felt the air leave her lungs. The dinner felt like a trap. Every time a fork hit a plate, the sound echoed like a gunshot. Yi Hyun didn't say a word to Amara. He didn't even look her way. Instead, he kept his eyes on Jae, watching how she moved, how she drank, and how she held her space. He treated Jae like a partner. He treated Amara like a piece of glass that might break. Nyla entered the room to clear the table. She moved like a shadow, her head down. As she reached for Yi Hyun's plate, her sleeve brushed against his arm. Yi Hyun didn't pull away. He allowed the touch to linger for a second too long. Amara's fingers tightened around her napkin. She saw it. And across the table, Jae saw it too. Jae didn't look away. She watched Nyla's hands. She noticed how the maid's breathing got fast and shallow. Jae was like a wolf sensing a hidden wound. She knew there was a secret between the boss and the help. Nyla stepped back, holding the plates to her chest. Before she turned to leave, she looked up. Her eyes met Jae's. The room went cold. Neither woman blinked. It was a silent war. Jae's face was perfectly still, while Nyla looked like a servant trying to hide a knife. Nyla finally broke the gaze and hurried out. Jae picked up her wine glass and took a slow, calm sip. The game wasn't just about the Empire anymore. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving a cold, freezing fog. Minseok stood at the exterior security checkpoint. The heavy iron gates were locked. His radio crackled. It was a routine perimeter check from the main house. He acknowledged it with a single push of a button. He stared at the massive, glowing windows of the dining room on the second floor. From his position in the dark, he could see the silhouettes moving inside. He could see Amara. Even from a distance, Minseok recognized the rigid line of her spine. He recognized the way she held her shoulders when she felt cornered. She was shrinking. The vibrant, intelligent woman who had once saved his life in a bloody alley was being slowly suffocated by the cold air of that room. Minseok's hands curled into tight fists inside his heavy coat. His discipline was an iron cage. He had built it over years of survival. He had accepted his exile to keep her safe, but watching her fade from a distance was a different kind of torture. He wanted to break protocol. He wanted to walk through the front doors, bypass Captain Han, and stand behind her chair. He wanted to be the wall she could lean against. A car drove past the outer perimeter, its headlights cutting through the fog. Minseok did not look at it. His dark, heavy eyes remained locked on the second-floor window. His protective instincts were violently flaring, burning away his restraint. He just chose her over his own survival. Was that loyalty, or the beginning of something much more dangerous? Tell me what you think, because this decision is going to cost someone everything. Dessert was served in silence. Amara felt physically exhausted. The mental energy required to maintain her composure was draining her completely. Jaya was speaking again. She was discussing a complicated zoning law for a new casino project. Yi Hyun listened intently. He leaned slightly forward, resting his forearms on the table. It was the posture of a man engaged. A man interested. Amara watched them. She looked at the subtle mirror of their body language. They were cut from the exact same cloth. They understood the mechanics of power without needing to translate them. Jaya finished her point. Yi Hyun nodded slowly. Then it happened. Yi Hyun looked at Jaya. It was not a look of business. It was a look of deep, familiar recognition. It was a private, unspoken acknowledgement of what they used to be and what they still understood about each other. Jaya held his gaze. She did not smile. She simply accepted the look, acknowledging the weight of it. Amara sat frozen. She was a psychologist. She knew the clinical terms for detachment, for emotional neglect, but the reality of it felt like a physical blow. Yi Hyun did not hate Amara. He simply did not need her. She was an aesthetic choice, a beautiful asset. Jaya was a partner. Amara looked down at her hands. She realized with absolute certainty that she was entirely replaceable in this house. She was a ghost in her own life, and the real haunting had just begun. It was past midnight. The dinner had ended hours ago. Jaya had been given the guest suite in the north wing. The estate was terrifyingly quiet. Yi Hyun stood on the balcony of his study, looking out over the dark grounds. He heard the soft click of the door. He turned. Jaya stood in the doorway. She was still wearing her silk blouse, perfectly composed. She stepped into the study. She did not ask for permission. You always hated the silence, Jaya said smoothly. She walked over to the small bar cart. She poured 2 glasses of scotch. She handed one to him. Yi Hyun took it. He looked at the amber liquid. Silence is necessary, Yi Hyun replied. Jaya took a sip. She walked toward the center of the room. She looked at the expensive art, the heavy books, the cold perfection of the space. It is flawless, Jaya noted. She turned to face him, her steady eyes locked onto his. You built an empire, Yi Hyun, Jaya said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a hammer. But not a home. Yi Hyun tightened his grip on the glass. The words hit the fracture he had been trying to ignore. He thought of the empty look in Amara's eyes. He thought of the strange comfort he sought from the maid. Jaya placed her glass on his desk. She stepped slightly closer. The scent of her perfume, something floral, expensive, entirely out of place in the sterile air of the study, reached him before she spoke. You chose a beautiful bird, Jaya murmured. Her gaze dropped briefly to his mouth before rising back to his eyes. But you forgot that birds die in cages, and dead things provide no warmth. Yi Hyun's jaw tightened. He noticed the pulse beating steadily at the base of her throat. She was undeniably, fiercely alive, and standing close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin against the cold draft rolling in from the open balcony. And what do you know about warmth, Jaya? He asked. His voice had dropped. The authority had dissolved somewhere in the dark. She didn't retreat. She reached out and gently pried the crystal glass from his grip, setting it blindly on the desk without breaking eye contact. I know that you're starving for it, she whispered. Her palms flattened against his chest. He could feel the pressure of her hands over his heartbeat, which was no longer steady. Playing a dangerous game, he warned. Always wanted to see what happens, she breathed, when the flawless facade finally cracks. It was the challenge in her eyes that did it. Hands moved to her waist. The silk shifted beneath his fingers. She drew a sharp, quiet breath and he stopped, not because he didn't want to. The wanting was the problem. Yi Hyun released her. He stepped back one deliberate step, putting cold air between them. His jaw was locked. His hands were rigid at his sides. Jaya didn't move. She watched him with an expression that held no disappointment, no rejection, just quiet, devastating understanding. There it is, she said softly. She picked up her glass from the desk. She walked to the door. She paused in the doorway without turning around. Cage isn't just for the bird, Yi Hyun. She left. The door clicked shut behind her. He stood alone in the dark study for a long time. The scotch sat untouched on the desk. The cold draft from the balcony filled the room, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel in control of a single thing. 2 floors above the study, the silence of the estate wasn't just quiet, it was a physical weight. Amara paced around her bedroom. The walls felt like they were closing in. The memory of the dinner looped in her mind, the humiliation, the private look between her husband and his former fiancé. She was suffocating. She needed oxygen. She needed something real. She stopped packing. She looked at the door. There was a protocol dictated for her to stay inside. Amara grabbed a heavy coat. She pulled it over her shoulders and opened the door. The surrounding was empty. The cameras tracked her, but she didn't care. She walked down the grand staircase. and bypassed the inner security checkpoints. She walked toward the service exit leading to the exterior gates. The cold air hit her instantly as she stepped outside. The freezing fog clung to the ground. She saw the silhouette standing near the iron gate, Minseok. He turned sharply at the sound of her footsteps. His posture snapped into absolute defense. He saw her walking through the fog. His eyes went wide. "Dr. Vaughn," he said. His voice was rough, completely shocked. "You cannot be out here." Amara ignored him. She kept walking until she stood directly in front of him. She was completely unprotected. She was breaking every rule of the estate. "I couldn't breathe," Amara said. Her voice shook. It wasn't from the cold. Minseok stared down at her. He saw the devastation in her eyes. He saw the cracks in her armor, the iron cage of his discipline violently fractured. The space between them vanished. Minseok took a single, desperate step forward. He towered over her in the dark. The freezing fog wrapped around them, isolating them from the cameras, from the house, from the world. He did not touch her. He kept his hands rigidly at his sides. The restraint was tearing him apart. Amara looked up at his face. He held his jaw so tight it looked painful. His breathing was heavy, ragged in the cold air. It was a suffocating one. "You should not have come out here," Minseok said. The words were a low, broken vibration in his chest. "I had nowhere else to go," Amara answered. She took a half-step closer. The heat radiating from his large frame was intense against the freezing night. Minseok closed his eyes. The agony of the proximity was absolute. "If they see you," he forced the words out. "If he sees you." "Doesn't see me," Amara said. The truth of it was hollow and final. He never did. Min-seok finally met her gaze, the professional distance he usually maintained dissolving into something raw and unrecognizable. Slowly raised his hand. His fingers hovered just inches from the edge of her coat. He was crossing the line. He was stepping off the edge before the fabric could make contact. An unusual sound echoed through the fog. It was the sound of a radio keying open. Someone was watching. Min-seok froze. Amara stopped breathing. The fog shifted, and a shadow detached itself from the wall of the guardhouse. Jayar knows exactly what she's doing, and the trap is perfectly set. She just proved to Amara that a ring doesn't make you a partner in this world. But who will make the fatal mistake first? Amara out of desperate isolation, or Minseok out of blind devotion? And who is standing in the fog with them? Tell me your theories in the comments. Do you think Jayar is here to take over the Empire? Or just to reclaim the boss? Subscribe and turn on notifications before the shadows swallow them whole in episode 3.